Bucharest! How y'all doing? No, wait a minute. Talk to me. How y'all doing? Yeah, that's more like it. That's more like it. First of all, thank everybody for being here. You know, it's not every day a whole lot of people come up to listen to you talk. I'm going to apologize right up front. I'm from New York City. Everything in New York City operates at about 200 kilometers an hour, and that's me included, right? So I'm already going to apologize up front if I start talking too quickly, all right? How should I start? I should probably start with what am I doing here? I was in Boston minding my own business a couple weeks ago, and a friend of mine who's in the audience here, we were having an early beer together. Some of you can hopefully appreciate that. And she mentioned, you know, this whole idea of common sense, and I hate the term common sense. I've always despised the term common sense, and I'll give you some reasons why in just a moment. But she managed to sweet-talk me into coming up to Bucharest. I've never been to Bucharest before, so I want to thank all of you for the warm welcome that I have received so far. And Lord knows if I get an opportunity, I will definitely be coming back. But I want to talk to you here about when uncommon makes sense. Now, I mentioned to you a little while ago, just a moment ago, that I don't like the word common sense. And you can see behind me 3 of the traditional dictionary definitions of common sense, right? And if you look, you'll see they all use words like judgment and being reasonable. And, you know, have a look at it really quickly. I'm not going to read them to you, but the notion, the whole idea that somehow we're going to be sitting in judgment on other people on a regular basis simply because they don't think the way we do is not something I'm terribly comfortable with. All those definitions are unbelievably vague. If you actually read them through and think about it word by word, you'll see that actually they're not really saying a whole lot, which is one of the problems that I have with the notion of common sense. My favorite definition of common sense is what I believe that you guys should know, right? Remember when your mother or your father would say, hey, that's common sense, or even worse, your boss says, why did you do it that way? That's common sense. I remember a couple years back, I was in Germany lecturing to an executive audience, and we were talking about managing customers. I'm a marketing guy, basically. And we were talking about managing customers, and the guy looks at me, he stands up, he's highly incensed. He stands up and he says, Bill, this is all just common sense. Ooh, I don't think he realized what he was saying. So I had to look at him. I said, okay, is it common sense? I said, then let me ask you a question. I said, I guess you and your company have common sense. He said, oh, absolutely. I said, oh, okay. So I guess you're making more money than your competitors, I asked him. Silence. I guess your people perform better than your competitors. Silence. And so I had to ask him, I said, well, you know, from what I'm hearing so far from you, I'm not seeing a whole lot of benefit from this thing that you call common sense. So maybe where I dance is perhaps more valuable than where you think you should be dancing. Small words have huge consequences. You know, what you call something influences how you behave towards it. The words that you use become the thoughts in your head, or vice versa sometimes. And they, in turn, determine the way you act towards other people, towards animals, just conditioning your behavior generally. There's a great Lao Tzu expression up behind me that you guys can read. Right? I'm a big believer that words are extremely important and are extremely powerful. And I'm, as you probably gathered from my accent, I'm Swiss. Believe it or not, I am. I'm Swiss American. But, you know, when it comes to the United States, we like to put people in boxes. You're a this, you're a that, you're a this, you're a that. And I've never been comfortable living in a box. So this whole notion of common sense and behaving the way everybody else behaves has never been my kettle of fish. One of the questions that I got from the TEDx organizers, was, what is your career? And I had to rethink that one, career. I thought, geez, you know, I've never had a career. I just make money. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't need anybody, as you heard from our introduction there, I don't like salaries. A lot of you here get a salary. Put your hand up if you get a salary. Come on, be brave. Put your hand up if you get a salary. You know what a salary is? A salary is somebody else telling you how much you're worth. Think about that. A salary is somebody else telling you how much you're worth. I don't need anybody to tell me how much I'm worth. I can look in the mirror. I know how much I'm worth. Thank you very much. And I bill accordingly. Right? So be careful of these small words, because small words have big consequences. Now, I'm not here to argue that there is no such thing as common sense. That would be idiotic, right? In my little world, in my little twisted mind, there's three types of common sense. You got the personal common sense, right? You stick your finger in the flame, it burns. Unless you're an idiot, you learn not to do that again, okay? Then there's the social common sense, right? Social common sense says, hey, I can't walk down the street in Victoria Street or whatever it's called here in Bucharest kissing all the beautiful women that I see because, hey, that's not common sense. Could also get me a hell of a lot of trouble, too. Then there's the organizational common sense, right? That's when you work for a company that has its own way of thinking, what they often refer to as company culture, and I'm sure some of you are going through that. Some companies even invent their own vocabulary. They have their own ways of spelling things. For example, if you work for General Motors in the US, you spell employee with one E, not two E's. I'm like, what's going on with this? I got my hand spanked because I actually spelled it correctly. No, 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 Bill, you're not supposed to do that. Oh, okay. So there's organizational common sense as well. All of these types of common sense that I've mentioned, all three types of them, are based upon the known, right? This is common knowledge. You know it, I know it, you know it, she knows it, he knows it, and therefore we all understand the same thing in theory, okay? The other side of that, which is one that really rubs me the wrong way, is that common sense is almost doctrinaire. As I mentioned to you, I'm a little bit Swiss. And in Switzerland, we have an expression in French, which is ça se fait pas comme ça. It's just not done like this. So you ask the people in the village next door who have a clock that wakes me up every morning when the clock chimes, that maybe they could substitute an electronic timer. Lady looks at me like I'm out of my mind. She says, but Bill, it's always been like this. I'm like, yes, in 1600s, yo, come on now. Don't you think we could improve a little bit? Don't you think, oh, but no, 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 no. And she's looking at me like I'm an idiot. Okay, I get it. It's just not done. And I'm sure many of you have heard that. I'm sure many of you have even grown up with that type of thing. That's not the right behavior. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. I want to give you some examples of when that whole notion of common sense is not common, at least as far as I'm concerned. I grew up in Senegal, as you heard. In Senegal, when you want to buy something, you negotiate the price, okay? Anything you want to buy, it's negotiable. There is no fixed price, all right? So you can imagine somebody coming from the West, from the United States or from Europe who comes to Senegal, they go to a market, they want to buy something, they're expecting a fixed price. And in Senegal, basically, we look at you, we look at what you're wearing, we look at what you got, we think how much money you got in your pocket, and then we fix the price accordingly. All right? I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. This is what I'm used to. But I'm sure that if I went into a supermarket here in Bucharest, grabbed a bottle of water, then went to the cashier and tried to negotiate with her how much I was going to pay for this bottle of water or bottle of beer, chances are I'm not going to get very far. So maybe what's common sense in Senegal is not common sense in New York City. It's not common sense in Geneva. Another quick example here. Some of you might recognize this is a very famous picture from World War II. And what you're looking at is two terrified black men from Senegal crouching in the snow that they've never seen before, because the French realized that they didn't have enough soldiers, so let's go get some of them black guys in Senegal, bring them up, put them on the lines. So they went and got 200,000 people that were called tirailleurs sénégalais, who helped protect France and valiantly fought against the Germans. An interesting anecdote to that is when the Germans captured the Senegalese, they felt insulted that they had had to fight against what they considered to be lower human beings. So the Senegalese were never sent to jail. They were shot. Common sense. This is a picture of a busy Helsinki street at 3 o'clock in the morning. I do a lot of work in Finland. And I remember coming out of a club in the Rantasippi Hotel early one morning, on my way back to the place where I was staying, and the streets were empty. Literally no cars in sight. I come to a crossing, a street crossing, there's a stoplight. What do I see? 15 people standing on the corner, not crossing the street. I'm thinking to myself, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not a car coming from left, right, center, wherever. Why are you just standing? So me, I cross the street. What do I hear behind me? All kinds of mumbling. I don't speak Finnish, so I don't know what they were saying, but I know they were talking about me. And I could also tell by the tone that it probably wasn't 100% complimentary. But the other side of that was, I got across the street before they did. Now, if you put that in a business context, which is where I'm going with this in a minute, you'll see where I'm going. Another little anecdote. As I mentioned to you, I've spent a lot of time living in Switzerland. We have a supermarket chain in Switzerland that's called the Migros. And the bottom line is one day I'm shopping and this little old lady comes up to me. It's January. Little old lady comes up to me. She looks at me and she goes, "Wow, it must be cold for you here." And I'm thinking to myself, what, I don't have a jacket? I left my pants at home? I mean, like, what's going on here? And she's looking at me so sympathetically. And I looked at her, I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, no." She says, "You know, you must come from Africa. It must be so cold for you here." Common sense, right? He's black. He must be from Africa. I'm like, yo, lady, I'm from Harlem in New York City, okay? Winter and time in New York is much colder than it is here in Geneva. So you don't need to worry about how cold it must be for me. I mean, I really appreciated it, but, you know, she was just way off base. Another example, in the United States, if you want to borrow money, you have to have a credit rating. What you're seeing behind me are the credit scores. You got to have a credit rating, otherwise they won't give you anything. But once you have a credit rating, you can literally walk into a car dealership, sign on a piece of paper, no money down, and drive away with a $30,000, $40,000 car, which is still a little more difficult to do here in Europe. In Switzerland, I wouldn't even have gotten the credit. In Switzerland, we have this strange idea that if you can't afford something, you just don't buy it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, what a strange idea. Actually being financially responsible. Oh my God, what is the world coming to? Here's another example that's maybe not so funny. Those of you who read the press, you've been probably reading about the problems that some of us black males particularly have been having with the police in the United States. So in terms of common sense, in terms of how you handle or behave towards a police person, if you're a white person, you might even argue with the policeman. If you're a black person, every second word is "sir." Okay? And you make sure that his hand is a long way from his gun. And as you can see from the statistics, we don't share the same ideas or attitudes towards the police. So common sense with respect to the cops, good luck. I believe that any educated idiot can carry out sophisticated analysis. And this is what happens in a lot of good corporations. They hire great people, very intelligent people, ask them to do very complicated analyses, and then misinterpret the results. You know what I mean? It's like trying to learn about life by dissecting a frog. By the time you dissect it, the thing is dead. How are you going to study life? Good luck. Good luck. Okay? Yes, I. Yes, I. Uncommon thinking. I believe that we all have an ability to see something bigger than what we see today. Okay? And then what differentiates us from some of the million others out there is that ability to see a different reality and to make it manifest. Here's one of my heroes, Aristide Boucicault. Frenchman in 1852 recognized that most women were unemployed, that most women were reliant upon men for any source of income. What does he do? He builds that huge store that you see on the right of the picture called Au Bon Marché, the world's first department store. Hires women, right? First time, legal employment, not prostitution, not concubinage. Hey, a real job. Also supported the suffragettes. Believe it or not, this guy is actually one of the founders of the women's liberation movement. Here's some other names. You recognize them: Branson, Musk, Jobs, Haji Oanu. He's the guy from EasyJet. Zuckerberg, you all know him. Page and Brin, right? Those are the guys that created Google. You think any of this was based on common sense? Here are some of my favorite companies at the moment. Aero Farms out of New York City. Indoor farming. Pulling as much plant material from a container as you get from 1 acre of land. Think about that. From a container, a 40-foot container. EasyJet, Airbnb, Lyft, I'm sure you know some of these guys. Hyperloop, Spotify, well-known companies. All of these companies did something different. Now, what was it that they did? And this is what I want to tell you about. And the clock is ticking. One, they found a gap. They solved a problem. All of these guys solved a problem. Two, they flew what we call the Ooda Loop. That's a term from the US Air Force. Okay? Ooda basically means observe. Okay? And then after you observe, objectify, design, and act. Okay? We all do this. We see something, we define what it is, figure out what we need to do, and we do it. We do it mostly very, very quickly. There are some people who've learned to put that into a process. That process became PayPal. And the people who started PayPal then went on to create LinkedIn, YouTube, Yelp, Slide, Tesla, Dig, Yammer, and a whole bunch of other companies using exactly the same technology. The third one is keep on keeping on. Even when everybody else is telling you you're crazy, because obviously you haven't sold anything. You're never going to sell anything. That's what they said to the guys at Airbnb. Ha, who's laughing now, a couple $2 billion later? Right? Pivot. Or fail wisely. You don't always get it right the first time. Hey, you know something? That's okay. Failure's good. You learn when you fail. If you're scared to fail, chances are you're never going to learn anything new, and you sure as hell won't try anything new. Okay? So let me back up just a minute. Hot groups. People who think differently, uncommon thinking. In a group, they feed off of each other. You guys with me here? You get what I'm saying? They feed off each other. It's complementary, and 1 + 1 + 1 is bigger than 3. Another one that these companies have all done is what we call gifting small goods. Look at Elon Musk. You all know who he is. You know what he does. Recently, there's been a little problem in Puerto Rico. So what does he do? He puts some of his batteries together, flies them down to Puerto Rico, plugs them into the local hospital so that people can get operated. Does he charge for this? No, $0. What he's hoping for, obviously, he can establish some goodwill, and they'll come back when they need some money. When they need more power. So, on a personal level, okay, because the clock's really ticking here, what advice can I give you? One, go to places you've never been before. Yo, Bucharest, okay? Do things you've never done before. That's going to take you out of your comfort zone. Do something you've never done before. Make a habit of it. Ask why. Why do I do this? Why do I drive to school? Why do I take the bus? Why do I drive my car? Ask yourself why 5 times, because each time you're going to get an answer. That's a technique created by Taiichi Ohno, who's one of the creators of the Toyota system. Amazing, amazing guy. Think about it. Try it when you go home. It's a great way to get to the heart of anything. Okay? Flip it. Man muss immer umkehren, as Carl Jacobi once said. Okay? And they're telling me my time's up, but I'm going to steal a couple of extra minutes here because I want to tell you a story. During World War II, the American bombers that were flying in to bomb the Germans were getting blown out of the sky, the B-15s. And so they hired this guy. He's an Austrian guy, to try and figure out how they should armor the planes. And what did the Air Force say? You put the armor where the bullet holes are for the planes that came back. You know what he said? He said, wrong. Because the reason the planes didn't come back is because that's where they got shot down. That's where we need to put the armor. Everybody with me here? He flipped it around. Okay? Highly successful. B-15s stopped being shot down. As I like to say to people, if you're not living on the edge, you're probably taking up too much space. The approach that I use to try and keep myself fresh is what I call the bonsai approach. I'm a bonsai apprentice. Maybe one day before I die, I'll be a bonsai master. But one of the things you have to do with your trees is after every 2 or 3 years, you got to pull them out of the soil and trim 2/3 of the roots. Now, for me, that's like cutting my children's fingers off. Then you put them back in, and then you got to pluck all those little leaves off one by one by one. The plant goes into shock, but then 4 or 5 days later, you see all these green sprouts coming up, and suddenly there's like an explosion of growth. New leaves, new life. You guys with me here? All right? I know it's easier said than done, but give it a shot. And finally, I want to leave you with one thought, if I may, because I'm way past my time. One final thought. If you want something that you've never had before, you're probably going to have to do something you've never done before. Don't freak out. Enjoy the journey. Thank you very much for your patience with me.